If you want to be perceived as, or actually just be a leader in real estate, stop separating out investment real estate from commercial real estate, from residential real estate. It's all just what? Real estate. Hey there, everyone. What a great day. That's such a fun song. I love it. And by the way, welcome to Core 90 training with the community here at eXp Realty. And today we're digging into something that I think is just going to be so much fun to talk about, which is creative finance strategies for agents. How to create deals where other agents see obstacles or where other agents feel like they're hitting a dead end. And sometimes this gets a little bit glossed over, I think, especially in the residential space. See a lot of commercial agents who have this knowledge or this expertise because they're putting deals together all the time. And many times their role is figuring out how to build the cap stack for a project, which means how am I going to find some equity? How am I going to find some debt? How am I going to help these guys get this all together? Many times on the residential side, it's like, gosh, I hope my lender takes care of everything. Otherwise, I can't put a deal together. And so we're going to try to empower ourselves today. And one of my very favorite key concepts in business came out of Mark Cuban. I don't agree with everything Mark Cuban says, but the guy is successful as all get out. And he said, if you've mastered the vocabulary in a given area, whatever that is, in this case, real estate, right? If you've mastered the vocabulary, interestingly enough, you will emerge as the leader. And I believe that. So thinking, well, I don't need to know that, or gosh, I could learn that later, is a little bit of a push off. And guess what? It's December 18th. Let's go after it. Let's have some fun. And let's go into the holiday season with our brains a little bit wrinklier than when we came to this call. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, your brain wrinkles when you learn something new. All right. You're like, wait a minute. I wanted brain Botox today. That's what you're going to do over the holidays when you eat and drink too much. All right. So today we're jumping in, and as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about creative finance structures for agents. And what's fun about this is there's a lot of broad categories, and I tried to break it down into some kind of big overarching strategies. So we're gonna try and get through 50 because I'm an idiot and I always do too much. And so today we're going to knock out 10, and again, we're gonna introduce you to these. If you really want to learn about them, there's like a book on every single one of these. So this could be like your reading for the next year. But how cool that you at least recognize a term and are able to start to speak intelligently. We're going to talk about how you can use some of these to unlock deals or even to partner with other agents. If you're like, I don't feel like I would be comfortable with that, that's okay. But there's someone who will be, and that person could then be your guide or your partner. You could just partner on deals, and instead of saying no to transactions, you could start saying yes to things or even creating transactions where they didn't exist previously. So we're going to do 10 owner financing strategies today. We're going to talk about 10 creative loan arrangements, 10 partnerships or JV strategies. JV is joint venture, and 10 tax strategies. By the way, strategies. All right, someone's fired. 10 tax strategies, 10 miscellaneous. All right. And I got to say, before we start on any of this, I am not your supervising broker. I am not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm just Jeff. I'm some guy on the interwebs. Whatever you hear here needs to be fact verified, and you definitely need to check with whomever, all of your regulatory bodies, authorities, et cetera. All of the liabilities on you. None of it's on me. All right. I guess we've gotten the point. Cool. Let's go to the next slide. So the question a lot of times, like, why do I need to know all or any of this, right? I just like putting easy deals together. And that's great when the market is like it used to be, right? When you could stand in the middle of the street and you sneeze and you get hit by 15 escrows. It was really nice, right? Everybody was making money hand over fist, super easy, and we didn't even need to think. And by the way, for some of my partners out there, if you happen to notice questions coming up in the chat and I'm not seeing them, please let me know. Just interrupt me. You know how it works. All right. So why do I need to know it? Because I believe that the way that you actually gain strength and authority in a given industry is by learning the terms. If you're a residential agent, whether it's your first day on the job or you've been licensed for 194 years, whatever your deal is, if you're running into stuff today where you're like, wow, I didn't know about that, that's awesome. That means you're actually gaining leadership in the industry. Nothing, by the way, nothing is a commercial strategy or a residential strategy. They're just real estate. And you need to know this stuff. And I'm still on my journey, learning and learning and learning. In fact, the more you teach, the more you learn, right? Guess what I'm doing today? So some of these strategies I've used with clients, definitely. And some of them I'm like, oh, this is exciting to learn about. And I've been doing a ton of research to get ready for today. So this is how we learn, how we know. Now I'm going to do what I always say I won't do, which is I'm going to give you the broad overview at the front. And some of you will screenshot it and go on, check your email. That's a mistake because the talking part of today is going to be how we're going to learn, but I'm going to do it anyway. So this is what we're covering today. And I just wanted you guys to have an opportunity to see it at the beginning. I'm going to do this again at the end, but if you want to grab your screenshot now, make sure you don't miss out. I think that's a cool idea. And so again, those 5 categories: owner financing, creative loan arrangements, partnerships, JVs, tax strategies, and miscellaneous. We're going to start in owner financing. And owner financing gets confusing. Sometimes people think that is the strategy, like owner finance. Yes, that's a broad category, right? There's a lot of ways to do that. We're only going to cover 10 today. There's probably like 2 million. And again, if you decide at some point in your career that you're going to start putting some of these deals together, you are going to need to either partner with or hire. You'll notice how I said that. Either partner with or hire an attorney. Why do I say partner with? Well, because sometimes attorneys have a way of being able to include themselves in deals that they're helping you to put together without charging you a cent. So that's an opportunity for you to be able to think differently about how to quote unquote hire people, right? Think about your clients. When they hire you to do a transaction, most of you probably get paid on what? Commission? Interestingly, that is a partnership structure. It is not a compensation structure. They didn't pay you an upfront, a retainer, and then an hourly, correct? That's how we work too. So there's different ways to put things together. That's really all, that's the core of what we're talking about today, is different ways to think about real estate other than just, gosh, I got a pre-qualified buyer. Let's go find them a house. And hopefully it's a house that their specific type of loan allows. We're going to get outside of that type of thinking. And the point today is just to rattle up our brains, shake it up, and do some things differently. So first and foremost, we've heard hopefully a lot of these terms before, but maybe we haven't been introduced deeply. And again, we've got enough time to like scratch and sniff a lot today. Here's what I would encourage you to do. If I were in this class, and I'm not, I'm up here, but if I were in this class, I would have a piece of paper next to me. I always have a notepad next to me. I'll prove it right here, right? And I just take notes throughout the day. And I would just start a page and I would write down any term you don't know. This is what I would do. And don't try and define it on the paper, just write down the term. That way you can remember later, I didn't know this. And then go and research it until you actually understand it. This would be what I would do. You do what you want to do. All right, number 1, seller carryback mortgage. This is where the seller actually acts as the lender, financing all or part of the purchase price. They could be financing this as a debt instrument. They could actually be financing in a secondary position. We'll talk about that later, to cover part of the equity on the property. Remember, every property is picked up on a blend usually of debt and some type of equity. Usually we call that a down payment. If you're in the commercial space, we might call it debt and equity, right? Buyer makes monthly payments directly to the seller, including interest. Yeah, they want to get some interest. Why? Because they're helping. Is this valuable to the client? Potentially, yes. Right? If they can't get this deal together otherwise, and terms are negotiable, everything's negotiable, guys. That's part of what you're going to learn today, is that real estate is this wide open butterfly. We can paint this bad boy up on a canvas. This is not something that's as structured and strictured as you've been led to believe. And then ideal for buyers who can't secure traditional financing. So again, if this is one where you're like, oh man, that's cool, I didn't know about that. Could you put a deal together this way? Well, hold on, how do I get paid my commission? You just bake it into the deal, right? Everybody now is working on both the listing side and the buyer side on contract with your clients. All of that's baked in from the get-go. Some of how you can structure this later on then doesn't eliminate those initial conversations or agreements. Again, I'm not your lawyer. All right, number 2. Number 2 is pretty common, right? This is a lease option. A lease option. What is that? Right? Maybe this is your first time ever hearing about it. Awesome. Your brain just got wrinklier. If you've heard of it, but you didn't know what it was, let's just cover it. All right. A buyer leases the property with an option, meaning an option is a contract that says I can purchase at a later date at a pre-negotiated price, right? And part of the rent could apply toward the purchase price or the down payment. Could, by the way, doesn't have to. There's different ways to do this. And then the purchase price, like I said, and the option period are typically agreed upon up front. What does that mean? It means I agree today to buy your property property within the next 2 years if I decide to execute my option for $2 million, right? And that means we've locked the price at this price point. So if in 2 years the property is worth $8 million, I still get to buy it for $2 million so long as I'm within my option period. And it provides flexibility for buyers to test the property before committing. That's kind of fun, right? Some people don't necessarily want to purchase. Some people are being a little speculative, meaning that they're purchasing a property thinking that maybe it'll gain value. There's different ways to do this. You could even subordinate this or get like a master lease agreement, which allows you to lease it and then someone else to lease it from you. There's ways to stack a lot of these strategies. We can talk about some of that later today too. Number 3, oh gosh, I got to hurry up. All right, contract for deed or a land contract. This is where your seller retains legal ownership of the property until the buyer completes all of the payments. All right, and how many payments? I don't know. Again, negotiable, guys. This is what we're going to keep harping on today. Things are negotiable. The buyer makes installment payments directly to the seller like a loan. The seller or an intermediary. Sometimes sellers will, if they're running this through a retirement account or something like that, they might have an intermediary there. There's no need for traditional mortgage financing from a bank. So any lenders on here that are having a meltdown, sorry, we're introducing everyone to the dark side today. There are other ways to do deals other than just, your neighborhood lender. Those are going to be your easy deals, but it's nice to be able to put things together when you don't know how. Commonly used in situations where buyers have limited credit options. By the way, bad credit doesn't mean bad buyer. I just want to clarify this. Bad credit doesn't mean bad buyer. Sometimes people have diminished credit because they've borrowed an extraordinary amount of money to what? Maybe start a business. I had this happen a number of years ago, right? And my person came in, their credit was a wreck. I said, none of my business, but what's going on? They shared with me what was going on. I put them together with some private money folks who actually do this as a side business. It's a thing to understand. And they put together something as a package for them. And guess what? 2 years later, they turned around, they sold that house, they bought 2 more because they were doing so well with their business. So things turn around for people, but bad credit doesn't mean bad buyer. It can, it doesn't have to. All right. What's a wraparound mortgage? This is where the seller maintains their existing mortgage, if applicable, right? Sometimes that's permissible, or there's ways to do it with trust and some other things, and creates a new loan for the buyer. So then the buyer makes payments to the seller, who turns around and pays payments to their loan and usually gets to keep a little bit of leftover for themselves. Pretty cool strategy. Who might be using this? Investors, a lot of times, right? Might try to structure something like this. And then it's also useful for sellers who have low interest mortgages that want to attract buyers, right? Sometimes we try to do this on assumption, but we could do it on a wrap. Again, they're going to have to consult with their mortgage documents to see if that's possible. And again, write these down if you don't know them. You can do more research later. Seller equity participation. This is an interesting concept to start to understand. Sometimes the seller wants to retain a percentage of their ownership or profits in the property. In particular, this happens on properties where it's going to be commercialized. I didn't say a commercial deal. It might be, right? Maybe it's an office building. Maybe it's a multifamily. Maybe it's a whatever, an industrial property. But maybe it's just a house or a portfolio of single family houses that's going to be used to generate income. And so now then the seller wants to retain a percentage of that ownership or even profits in the property. There's all sorts of reasons. Maybe they want to be able to borrow against that. Maybe they just want the cash flow, right? But they're trying to create a little bit now, a little bit later type of a strategy. And this works well for that. Also reduces the buyer's upfront costs, though, when they're aligning those incentives. Because a lot of times, if I'm not being able to purchase as much equity, guess what? That's less probably down payment. All right. So it's a really great thing used in commercial or development deals a lot of times. What's a second mortgage, right? A seller second. This can be utilized as part of a purchase strategy where the seller provides a secondary loan to cover part of the original purchase price for the buyer. Often used to bridge the gap between the buyer's down payment and the primary loan. So maybe they've got a loan for $400,000. They can do a down payment of $100,000, but we need an extra $30,000 for whatever reason to be able to get the deal closed. The seller then offers a loan for that amount, right? So long as everyone's okay, they're probably going to have to do what's called subordinating their loan, which means putting it in second position as a lien on that collateral or the property, so long as the first loan allows that. And then guess what? Now the buyer has 2 mortgages effectively, or 2 loans, and they also then have their equity position in the property. Okay. What's a seller note with a balloon payment. What's this balloon thing, right? Okay, that's not a hot air balloon. This is where the buyer makes regular payments for a set period of time, and then there's a large lump sum, a big payment to pay off the deal, which is called a balloon payment due near the end of the term or at the end of the term. This allows buyers to secure ownership with lower initial payments. Could be much lower initial payments, by the way, because that balloon is coming due. Why would this be beneficial for the person who's making the loan? Could even be the seller, by the way. So we can blend these strategies. Seller financing could be, remember, that's what we're talking about. Owner financing, the seller is offering this. But why the balloon? Well, because they want to recapture all of the equity in the property or all of the capital that they're trying to get back. Where could this happen, though? Sometimes sellers can't find a good buyer for their property. But if you could offer something like this, like, listen, why don't you finance this portion or all of the property purchase, and then I'll have a balloon in 2 years. Why would you offer a balloon in 2 years? Because you're anticipating that rates are going to restabilize, and then you're going to be able to buy out of your initial position with an even better mortgage. So it's better for the buyer. It could get the seller where they need to go for now because they get enough cash on day one to be able to go make their next purchase or to feel good about this. And then they know that that balloon is coming and it's going to be legally required. Rent to own, kind of a little bit of a catch-all phrase here, but let's at least talk about it. This is where we combine really a rental agreement with an option to purchase. And so a portion of the rent could be credited toward the purchase price, right? And very similar to a lot of other things we've talked about, but it allows the buyers to build equity while living in the property. And again, remembering that you can combine strategies. There's no hard and fast on all of this. All this could really be done on a napkin. And we're just saying, we're going to do this. And here's what you're going to do. This is what we all agree to. And sign here, sign here, sign here. You will very likely need to consult with your managing broker, whomever your supervising broker is, if you're putting a deal together in these ways. And that's terrific. They can help you through it. And if they don't know how, make a couple phone calls, we'll help you out. All right. A deferred down payment. Deferred down payment could be, this is, again, in relation to if you are executing with owner financing, that's where the seller allows the buyer to pay the down payments in installments. Okay. Why could this be valuable? Well, on a higher price point property, this might be really nice. Perhaps the buyer has a very, very qualified cash flow position monthly off of, like, let's say their business. But as they're coming into the property, they need a little bit more wiggle room on their cash positioning. And the seller says, great, I've got kind of a unique property, like a horse property on 5 acres or something like that. I don't know how I'm going to put this deal together. Great, let's come to a meeting of the minds here so that we can all get what we want within time. And it's structured with a written agreement. Again, you'd have to consult an attorney to help you to lock it in. But it's commonly used when those buyers lack the liquidity or cash, but they have steady income. Okay, and then lastly, equity sharing. This is where a buyer and seller share ownership of the property based on agreed terms. The buyer and the seller share ownership. Interesting. Equity. What is equity? It's how much we own, right? And so how could we do this? Well, we could do it on a partnership. We could create an LLC and sell the property from the seller into an LLC that's collaboratively owned. Like if Joanne owns a property, but she doesn't want to own all of it anymore. She just wants to own half of it. She could do something like this, sell half to me, I pick up the other half, we then collaboratively own it in an LLC. It technically changes hands, but she went from 100% to 50%. Why might that be good for her? Because maybe I give her money for that 50%. That's why, right? And so she's been owning it. Maybe the cash flow has increased over time. She's like, I could take half of that, and I'd love to have a big lump sum right now so I could do some other things. Cool. So this is how we could do it, partnerships or investment scenarios. And a lot of times this would be used on the commercial side, but many times in investing. And remember that commercial just means that I can commercialize a property, meaning I could create cash flow or investment potential off of this property. True for single family homes. In fact, now more than ever, we can see big builders out there. Has anyone seen this? Big builders making a lot of BTR communities, build to rent, right? That's taken over right now across the country. You got to get familiar with that. Is that a good or bad thing? Neither. It doesn't matter. Who cares what you think? Right? What it is people don't want to live in stacked in multifamily homes where when your neighbor farts, you can smell it. So guess what? Now we can put it in single family homes, and that's great. We'll just operate the whole neighborhood like it's an apartment complex. It's a great thing. All right. Our next strategy. I can always tell who's paying attention because they laugh when I say fart. So that's a good thing. All right. Creative loan arrangements. We're going to talk about that today. Creative loan arrangements. This just means, how could we put loans together outside of the kind of normalized lending channels that benefit our clients? Is this always going to be a good fit? No. If you understand these, though, could you leave options open when it seems like all the doors have closed, where you're like, wait, I know where 18 other doors are located? Yes. And is that interesting? It should be. It should be. This gives you options. By the way, it also will give you options if you want to acquire properties, for instance, as rental properties. And I think that all agents should be owning what they're selling. Okay, very cool. Number 11. So this is called subject to or sub to financing, right? If there's a lot of like big speakers out on this stuff. I think the guy in this space is Pace Morby. I know Joanne's son worked for him for a while. So very cool people out there who talk a lot about this stuff. But this is where buyer takes over payments on the seller's existing mortgage, but the seller remains legally responsible for the loan, but the buyer then controls the property, right? You have to do this in a fairly prescribed way, but there are great legal ways to do this. You can still, by the way, if you are the agent helping put a deal like this together, you can still extract a fee or commission. Again, talk to your broker on how to do that, but there are definitely ways to do that. You'll just need the right documentation, paperwork, and agreements up front. This allows the buyers, though, to leverage existing favorable loan terms. Let's give an example. Somebody during the 2020 craziness got a loan for 3.5%. Right? And you're able to purchase the property subject to that original loan. Maybe you need to take out another loan that you could subordinate, and you pick up a little equity position because you throw some cash in the deal. Ooh, that feels so blendy. It's 3 ingredients, you guys, like egg, flour, water. This is not that hard. We're making pancakes. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, we try to make things seem, well, it's so complicated. Read a book. It's not that bad. All right. But then it's common in markets with low interest rate loans. This right now is one of those markets. So you could be running into some of these. It's really good stuff. Let's keep going. What's an assumable mortgage? Some mortgages say up front that the buyer could actually assume this mortgage based on certain terms. You'll have to find that out. But if you're selling a property and it has an assumable mortgage, you better be advertising that, in my opinion. One guy's opinion, right? I'm not your broker. But I will tell you why. Because if I'm shopping for a property in your market, I'm typing in assumable in literally the search category, so it will scrape and find all of the agents who managed to write that in their descriptions. I want to know that. Why? Because I assume it's not assumable at 18%. It's assumable at something better than right now percent. Does that make sense? So you'll want to know that. And this means that the buyer could come in, pick up that mortgage at a great rate. Maybe it doesn't cover the entire position. And you're going to have to figure out that additional equity play, right? Because maybe the buyer bought it for $1 million, now it's worth 1.3. Well, guess what? You got to figure out that 0.3 part, but maybe your client can pay that. And then they want to pick up the $1 million or whatever's remaining on that note that covered the $1 million, maybe 800,000 or 750 on 3%. And then they could have a blended mortgage rate with a new mortgage covering some of the remainder. Okay. That all sounds complicated. I know a lot of people are getting glossy. Take a hit of your coffee. Let's keep going. I'll do it too. All right. Next up, cross-collateralization. These words are getting so big. We had more than 3 syllables. All right. What's collateral? Collateral is usually the property on a loan, right? And we're talking about loans right now. So cross-collateralization is where my loan references more than what? One property. My loan is collateralized by more than one property. It's cross-collateralized against multiple properties. Has anyone ever heard of, I've got this investor and they're going to sell a portfolio of houses, right? You've heard that maybe term tossed around. Hopefully some of you have done those types of deals. I see some great investors on here, so I know some of you have done those types of deals. When somebody does that, a lot of times they might take a loan out against that entire portfolio. That's called cross-collateralized. If the borrower defaults, that means the bank can go after all of the properties to figure out how to get their money back. Even more gooder for the bank. It always is. Or the private lender. Hard money loan. Hard money loan simply means short-term, high-interest loan based on property value rather than credit. Usually, by the way, from a private lender or an investor might want to do this. A lot of investors kind of, let's call it, graduate from owning properties and being in the 1031 game. At some point, they need life after landlord, and they go into just lending their money instead of wrapping their money into properties. They might do short terms with balloons. They might do long 30-year mortgages. Who knows? But hard money loans tend to be shorter. We're referencing a lot of times these high interest loans. Why would somebody want one of these? Maybe they're going to do a quick rehab and then they're going to refinance out of the first loan into a new loan. So while they're in the rehab, maybe that high interest rate doesn't matter. They just need to get their hands on some money so you can grab a property quick, right? Okay, perfect. Next, private money loan. Similar to the first one, except a little bit more broad, simply means that we're going to borrow this from an individual or a private entity. Entity meaning could be an LLC, right? Usually controlled by one or two partners, that kind of a thing. But this would be where if I went to, Ray Coburn, I see him on here, and I said, hey, Ray, I found this awesome property. Can I borrow 750 grand? He's like, sure. Sounds good. Let's figure out some terms, right? So Ray is going to be the bank. I'm going to be the borrower, right? Mortgagor, mortgagee, all that stuff. We remember that from real estate school. But we can now get this deal done. Did I go to Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Mr. Lender's broker? No, I didn't do any of that. I went to a dude, right? Or a gal or some person or an entity who does this in a private capacity, not to the general public. There, by the way, are brokerages that broker those on behalf of private money people. You'll always pay just a little bit more if you're going through a broker, probably because they have to extract fee as well. All right, what's a bridge loan? This is short-term financing. Think a bridge, right? Short-term. I'm not on a bridge for forever. To bridge the gap between buying and selling properties. This can be really critical because it could help a buyer to secure a new property before selling their current one. So strategically, have you ever run into a seller who's like, how am I going to, I need to this, that, and I'm freaking out because my perfect property just showed up and now I realize I need to sell my current one because I didn't plan ahead, usually. All right. What are we going to do? Well, let's just introduce them to the concept of a bridge loan. Let's get them, there's other ways to do this, by the way, but let's introduce them to this concept. Maybe it's a great fit. And they're not going to have to pay that high interest for very long. Then they can just pay their way out of the note and move on with their lives. It's awesome. And many times what we'll do is when they go for permanent financing, right? Or rate and term financing, then they can take out that bridge loan and the new lender, maybe even a traditional lender, would understand that we're going to buy out the position of that bridge loan. Not a big deal. Okay. So usually a little higher interest rate on a lot of these, but that's good for the investor who's putting their money at risk and good for the person who's able to now do something that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. What's a convertible loan? This is a loan that could convert into equity ownership in the property or the project. This a lot of times comes out of convertible debt that was used in the 90s a lot as it pertained to like tech startups, right? Can we use it in the real estate space? Of course, very much so. In fact, I see it a lot of times in partnerships. Where maybe one partner owned a big property, let's say a multifamily, and they wanted to bring other partners on. Those partners are going to earn their keep, right? So they're going to keep paying kind of their position as debt into the property until that other partner is able to give them their equity as a result of their payments. This could also be another way to kind of buy someone out of a property over time, or even if you're structuring like a business and real estate together. Sometimes I see this as a hybrid strategy. You'll need to bring a business broker to the table and they're going to need to get paid too. But guess what? Partnerships and collaboration, that's big boy, big girl stuff. This is fun. We're at the adults table today, right? It's really good stuff. I love it. I get to be part of the adults table. I remember when I got to switch up to the adults table, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, am I still allowed to pick my nose? I don't know. All right. Number 18, participation loan. What is that? Some of these we just put titles on over time just because we've done things, right? This is where a lender receives a share of the property's income. The lender, by the way, could be the seller, could be a third party, an investor or private money lender. A share of the property's income or profits in addition to interest. All right. Where could we see this? Commercial properties, investment properties, right? Same deal. I go to Ray. I said, hey, listen, I need some money to buy this property, but it's going to cash flow like crazy. Here's the metrics on it. Here's the T12. Here's everything. And I want you to take a look at it. He's like, yeah, let's do it. But I also want 10% of the upside, right? I want 8% or 12% on my money, and I want 10% profit. Okay, cool. Whatever gets me, that means I got 90% and I'm using his money. That's great, right? I'm in. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. All right. Number 19 is a shared appreciation mortgage. What do these words mean, guys? Remember, we're learning vocabulary today, and part of the reason we learn vocabulary is so we can sound more intelligent. Will you get more listings if you can talk about these types of things? Yes. Ray's like, yes, you will. Why? Because you understand different types of structures that you can talk about with your clients. It gives you options where they're like, well, I don't think I can sell because blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, we've got 5 options. Boom, bow, bing, bow, ooh, right? Let's go. Let's pop a sign up today, baby. All right, shared appreciation. This is where the lender, could be a private individual again, could be you, benefits from a portion of the property's future value increase. Future value increase. What is that? Equity, right? Remember, there's 5 benefits in investing: income, depreciation, equity, appreciation, and leverage. Okay, so in this case, it would be equity. This is value increase. This reduces the initial interest rate for the borrower, common to make financing more affordable in high cost markets. Think San Jose, right? That Los Altos, these places where you have to pay $600 million for a broom closet to live in. So it's a half bedroom, quarter bath. Congratulations. All right. And number 20, this is the last one in our loan arrangements category. We're almost 2/5 of the way there, guys. And this is seller financed bridge loan. Oh, now we're mixing things. It's too confusing. I'm tapping out. All right. This is where the seller provides temporary financing just to help the buyer to close the deal. Huh? So the seller makes a loan to the buyer so that the buyer can make a loan to buy the house from the seller. And that was too many things. There's 2 things. That's not too many. It acts as a short-term loan until the buyer secures permanent financing. Again, if you don't know it, write it down. How would you figure it out later? Google. All right. Flexible terms negotiated between the buyer and the seller. By the way, this is true on all these. Can all of these terms be negotiated? Yes. I see a lot of savvy agents on here nodding their heads. Yes. Everything could be negotiated and useful in time-sensitive transactions, right? This could be, I really need to get this deal done so that I can do this other deal. I've got time restraints, right? Timing restraints. We're going to talk about things that can create timing restraints in a few minutes. All right. Now we're going to go, and let me break up the monotony so you can see my face real quick. All right. So I got to go back here and to say, hopefully you're learning some stuff today. And even if what you're learning is, wow, I don't know this, that's okay. That's a great thing to learn. That's a great thing to learn. Make a long list. Start figuring. I'm going to give you the whole list again at the end of the class. Just use your 50 to start to educate yourself, and just go through the 50 again and again and again until you feel like you could explain all of them to a friend. Right? If you can explain it to someone, guess who else you can explain it to? A client. Guess what else that means? When you're sitting in a listing appointment or a buyer appointment, can you now explore options you didn't even have in your tool belt? You're like, well, I've been using my screwdriver just to whack in nails. I didn't realize there was such a thing as a hammer. Dang it. All those nails are going to be so much easier to deal with from now on, right? That's what we're trying to do today. Just give you tools. All right. Give you tools. Don't be a tool. Well, anyway. All right, here we go. We're back. Partnerships and joint ventures. Partnerships and joint ventures. What does that mean? Well, this comes out of the business world, right? If I have a partnership or a JV, a partnership would mean we're collaborating on the same LLC. Joint venture would mean my LLC plays nicely with your LLC in a pre-negotiated way, right? So how could this all work? Could be between 2 individuals as well. Tends to be through corporate structures, entities, right? So we'll just intermediate one level. A joint venture. This is 2 or more parties collaborate to invest in or develop a property, right? And so each partner contributes resources like capital, expertise, labor, maybe the land. Who knows? What their contribution is negotiable. It could be a Rolex. I don't care, right? But they're contributing something into the partnership. And then profits and losses are shared based on an agreed partnership structure. That could be an equity agreement. It could be a profit sharing agreement. It could be just a distribution agreement. It could be rev sharing agreement. It could be all sorts of things, right? Often used for large scale projects, can be used for smaller stuff though. And we're going to talk about some even more intense structures today that I think you should know about, because you and your friends could play and put some stuff together. How cool. Did he say play? Yeah, this is all a game. If you hadn't figured that out yet, that's why it's not fun yet. It's fun when you figure out it's a game. All right, number I own half LLC that owns the property. and you own the other half of the LLC that owns the property. I just saw that my internet was unstable, so sorry if I sounded like blah, 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 blah. All right, next. So this is used in a lot of times to scale purchasing power so that I could participate with a partner. Let's just say that one of my buddies and I want to buy a property. We both collaborate. We put our money together. We say, let's collaborate, and we're going to use our combined purchasing power to go do this deal. We're now equity partners. We can talk about a lot of different ways to do that. And then maybe on the heels of that, we would have a profit sharing agreement. Maybe I only put in 20% of the capital and Raymond put in 80% of the capital. Well, our profit sharing agreement would probably, unless I also donated the land, would probably reflect that 80-20 split, meaning when profits came in, because he had taken 80% of the risk, he'd take 80% of the profits. Is that fair? I don't know. Just depends.
Well, I really wish I had the rest of his slideshow, then I could just move right through it, you guys. But profit sharing, I'm just going to add. There he goes. He's going to silent partner. So let's see if I can help on these. There he is. All right.
Hey, John, sorry about that, man. Yeah, well, this is the beauty of the internet is that it works until it stops working. All right. So I want to make sure we didn't miss one there. We had profit sharing agreement on the back heels of that, John.
Nope, you didn't miss any.
Okay, great.
Pretty straightforward.
All right. So silent partner. Tell me, what is a silent partner, John? And it's awesome that you're here because John Sellers, for anyone who doesn't know, awesome real estate investor.
I don't know if I know all these.
Well, it's on the screen, so just read it if not.
The big deal is a silent partner is a great way to go because there's somebody that really just wants to invest capital and they don't want to be participative in the management of the day-to-day. They receive, and it's true that it's all again set up. It's going to be similar to what we did, or corporate investment usually, and really it's just going to be a matter of what their agreement is of how they're going to get paid out. And so a lot of times if I'm investing, if I've had partners in deals, it's frustrating. Like I'm in some deals right now where I'm 50-50 with the partner and he's not a silent partner. So it's like we're having to discuss everything that's going to be done. I have to wait for him to do things. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Versus if you've got a silent partner, it's like, hey, they're just throwing the money and they're counting on you to get the stuff done, and you just to agree how you're going to pay them. So,
love it.
Silent partner.
It's like a limited partnership on an LLC, and this could be a direct investment, right? It's really awesome. I love this conceptually because, and by the way, thanks for covering for me, buddy. It keeps the other person necessarily out of the day-to-day management of the project. What is a syndication? Now, this is one where I really want you to write this down. If you haven't learned this, there are a lot of the mid-market deals. What do you mean by that? Well, I mean, small multifamilies are happening this way right now a lot. A syndication, and I learned really intensely over the last couple of years all about syndication because Lexi's son is now a real estate attorney and he focuses on syndications. So this is all we talk about now. And it's awesome. So I've learned a ton about it. But what does this mean? Well, it means generally you have one person who's a sponsor, meaning they find a deal. Let's say it's a 10-unit apartment complex, right? They're going to be the general partner and the sponsor for this project. But then they can create what's called a syndication, which is an investment opportunity for other people to come in and place their capital as what are called LPs or limited partners in this project. What am I using? I'm using other people's money to fund the deal. Then we could raise whatever position of capital we need for the equity part of the capital stack of this project, right? So the equity is, think of it as the down payment in this type of a structure. And then we go find a bank who will finance the remainder. Let's say the bank's going to pick up 80% of the property. We're buying a $2 million property. So they're going to write a check for 1.6 mil, right? But I got to go raise 400K from my friends, right? This is country club investing 101. Right? If I'm going to do that, I would use a syndication. That's great. A syndication, easy to put together for an attorney who's experienced. And by the way, you can find flat fee people who will do this without hourly. That's what Lexi's son does. And I think it's a cool model. So it doesn't just kind of bleed you dry. But anyway, it's a way of pooling resources. I love that. What's an option agreement for partnerships or JVs? This is where the buyer pays for the exclusive right to purchase a property within a set time frame. We kind of talked about options earlier, but you can do this inside of a partnership or a JV as well. And I thought it was worth mentioning here because it's so powerful that this option execution, a lot of times people will do a double close based on an option. A double close simply means I've bought an option, I've been paying on it. Now that property is worth 50% more. I find somebody else who wants to buy it for the 50% more purchase price. I then execute the option and close to that new person at the same table. Very cool. Or maybe two tables, slightly timed apart. Tenants in common, this is a TIC agreement, right? This could be simply that we're going to share ownership of a property with distinct ownership percentages. You see this sometimes on condos, right? Beachfront stuff a lot of times can do a lot of these agreements where maybe I have a use agreement or a TIC agreement that says, yeah, I get to use it for 4 weeks out of the year. So I've bought a, proportionate 1/13 ownership in that property, right? 4 weeks, wait, that's 1 month. Nope. Take 4 times 13, you'll come up with 52. There's 13 months in a year. I don't know what's wrong with this. All right. Limited partnership. Passive investors. This is for limited partners to contribute capital but have no management role. We've talked about several structures. These are all different words that describe similar things. Ultimately, all of this gets clarified. For instance, if you're buying the property into an LLC in what's called your OA or your operating agreement. So you're going to always specify with a lot of clarity how all this stuff works, and a great attorney will just structure it for you. You don't have to think too much, right? Well, what if I can't afford an attorney? Then partner with the attorney. Bring them onto the deal. That sounds good. They'll love that. What's a 1031? We're covering this one today as well. And this could be as part of a partnership. This is where you combine the tax benefits of a 1031 exchange. We're going to cover what that is in detail in a minute, with a partnership structure. Now, this is a bit complex, and you would need to. We've brought a really great 1031 intermediary or 1031 facilitator, or what's called a qualified intermediary, a QI, I believe, a qualified intermediary, onto the call before. These are people who help with these 1031s and also act as escrow for their funds. But you'd need to run this through someone else. Just trust me, guys. You're not doing these on your own. But why does this matter? Because sometimes maybe Joanne and I already own that property I was saying we were picking up together, right? And now we both want to do a 1031. Well, we can't just do that from our LLC into another LLC. It's not going to work. We both end up with a 1031 for our proportionate interest. It all needs to be very exacting and down to the penny. And then we drop into our time frames, our 45-day window to obligate to a property, 180 days to close, all that kind of stuff. And then a reverse equity split. What? This is fun. By the way, if you guys are finding that you're discovering terms today where you're like, I don't know that, listen, you're getting smarter. I want you to talk to your clients about this stuff. Figure these things out and then say, well, listen, this probably is not going to be what you need, but we could also do a blah, 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 blah. Does that build your competence in front of your client? Yes. Abso-freaking-lutely. Talk to your friends about these strategies. They're going to be like, geez, Louise, Ed's a genius, right? That's because you are. How do you become a real estate genius? Just by knowing all the stuff. That's it. It ends once you know everything. It's not that complicated, right? We like to pretend like it's complicated. Well, you're so smart. No. You can just memorize a bunch of stuff, book style, right? Remember? All right. Partners gradually buy out another partner's equity over time. This happens also in businesses, right? I could buy a business from, I see Ed Burdick on here. He's awesome, right? Maybe Ed owns a business and he wants to get out of it. He's like, I'm retiring from this thing, but it cash flows really nicely. I say, listen, I'll buy your business, but I'll just do it on a reverse equity split. I'll give you 30% of profits from now until it reaches this number. And we could pre-calculate when that'll be, based on some assumptions. How cool. We can do that on properties. Remember, because properties, especially for commercializing those properties, they actually act as businesses. They don't just act as properties. This is something that's going to make you a lot more flexible in the way that you think about buying and selling real estate. Buying and selling real estate. Okay. Tax strategies. One more time with my disclaimer here. I'm definitely not a CPA, I'm not a tax strategist. I'm not your attorney. I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. Like, you need to talk to somebody, y'all, if you're going to do this stuff for yourself. But you can present options to your clients. And when you present these options to your clients, remind them that you in turn are also, unless you are, not an attorney, not a tax advisor, but that they should consult theirs. But by the way, don't just stop there. Have 3 tax advisors, CPAs, consultants that you can point to who you could say, and if you don't have one, let me give you a couple recommendations. This is on your preferred provider list. This will be important for you. And interview these folks, make sure that they're familiar with tax savvy strategies. But I had somebody tell me early on, it might have been John Sellers, when I started in real estate, if you are trying to find your people to put on your list, especially in these categories, make sure here's the easiest way to vet them, right? I remember how I picked my first CPA. I went into his office, I sat down with him. I'm like, awesome. I said, what percentage of your personal portfolio is in investment properties? And he was like 60%. And I was like, awesome. We're a good match. Because you're going to be able to not just guide me in terms of doing it, he's doing it for himself, right? If he's having to do it for himself, I know he wants to be good at it, because if he screws up, he's got to wear orange and, go to the yard every day. That gets real awkward. So I'd rather him know what he's doing so he doesn't get me into trouble. If he's trying not to get himself into trouble, we're in good shape. All right. What's an installment sale? Well, it's what it sounds like. It's exactly what it sounds like. So where the seller spreads payments over time instead of receiving a lump sum. How is this a tax strategy, Jeff? Because it actually might reduce the year-by-year capital gains implications for that seller. Many times this happens on humongous property sales. Could be commercial, but a lot of times this could happen on big properties. Like I saw recently, like a $30 million house on the coast in Florida sold, right? Well, depending on the tax strategy of the seller, they might actually accept payment as an installment sale in order to limit the capital gains implications and allow them to do different things with that money. Or maybe even wait for some legislation to come into play, right? Very cool stuff. So people have different strategies. We mentioned before a 1031 exchange. Please write this down. This is an IRS tax strategy that allows a property owner, let's say that I buy a house for $100,000. Now it's worth $200,000. I'm making the math easy. How much have I gained? $100,000. I've gained $100,000, right? Well, normally if I just sold that property, what would I have to do? I would have to pay taxes on the gains. Is that bad? No. Why? Because I made money. But maybe I don't want to pay taxes. What if I want to take my money and just make more money, but my property's gotten a little sour, or I could make more money by buying a different kind of property because now I have more buying power? Well, what I could do is I could pull my money out, and then I could take that money and place it into what's called a like-kind property. And when I do so, I defer. It doesn't eliminate, it defers my capital gains obligation, but I can keep deferring until I, the other D, die, right? I can keep deferring forever. So I can keep cash flowing and growing my capital, which means my cash flow should also grow, because usually cash flow is expressed as a multiple against, or not a multiple, a percentage against equity. All right. Opportunity zone investments, right? This came out of the 2017 Jobs Act. It's interesting. They're not everywhere, but there are these areas around the country where if a developer or someone's building or they're recapitalizing or they're buying a business or whatever, they can buy these into what are called opportunity zones. And then you're going to have to build a fund. You'll have to be able to structure a private equity offering. If you're on the selling side, it's more complicated. But also, if you have some additional capital laying around, it's a very cool thing. What's cool about it? Well, the structure simply indicated that if you hold these for over 10 years, that provided all the other guidelines are met, that there's not going to be any capital gains. So this could be an exit for people who have been doing that 1031 thing and then want to kind of get out of jail. Very, very cool strategy, and was designed to kind of create economic development in some underprivileged areas. Depreciation recapture strategies. Depreciation recapture is awful, right? And what that really means is, as you're depreciating an investment property over time, when you go to sell it, or the disposition event, the sale, right? Disposition event sounds very fancy. It's just sale of the property. Guess what? Then there's going to be a recapture on depreciation to the IRS, right? They're always looking to steal your lunch money. So it's their job. It's okay. They're doing their job. You're doing yours. But there's strategies out there to minimize or eliminate this. And so you're going to want to learn those. But it's taxed at a maximum of 25%. But timing can be a really big part of this. So you're going to want to learn about that, especially for yourself or for your investor clients, right? You can save them a lot of money. If you save them a lot of money, guess what they're going to want to do with you more? Invest. That's awesome. If you're their agent of choice because you're a great strategic advisor, then they're going to love working with you. If you notice all the investors are working with someone else, it's because you don't know this stuff. That's why. The only difference. The second you know all this stuff, the second they'll all work with you. Preferred property or deferred, property tax agreement. This is where you can negotiate with local authorities. This is especially if somebody, let's say that you talk to a client and they say, well, I've got a developable piece of land. By the way, every client who has land says that crap to you. You need to fact check all of that business, because half the time that is just completely fallacious. That just means that they have enough land in their mind, right? But sometimes you can even go to the city or the municipality, whomever has created that additional tax burden. It depends on where you live, right? And you can literally ask to delay or reduce, sometimes eliminate taxes based on the size of that development and the net economic perceived value for the municipality. Very cool, right? Maybe the government literally says, we won't charge you any property taxes for the next 2 years while you develop that, or forever, because we think that this creates a ton of value. How would you do that? Well, research it, but you're going to have to start at a conversation with the municipality. Usually they have an application process. You just go through it. It's like anything else. Walk into the city office and say, I are dumb. How do I do this? Right? And they'll tell you. It's great. It's the coolest thing. The people at the front desk know more than anyone in that office. They're going to tell you everything you need to know. What's cost segregation? All right. Cost segregation is a way to accelerate and amplify the amount of depreciation that you can do on a property. So if I wanted to depreciate maybe like a huge amount against a property that I purchased, and I'm also using bonus depreciation or advanced depreciation to take a lot of that on year one, holy moly, how am I going to break all this down? Well, a cost segregation says that a roof depreciates at a different rate than a wall. That's all it does. And then there's a study that's done. You have to pay to have this done, but it will cost you something. You just need to know that you're going to hold the property long enough to benefit from it. And I see John Sellers on here. Right? John,
I just might want to give you an example on this, because
I love it.
Cost segregation now on, sorry, my lawnmower guys here, but you can do cost segregation. It used to be only like McDonald's did it because it was very expensive. But now you can do cost seg on individual houses, and it's not that expensive.
Right.
So a couple of years ago, and I know Jake's done this, I did it on my almost all my portfolio. And the one that I love to share with people is I had sold a property and I had a $250,000 gain. I bought a 16-plex up in Roseburg for about $1,100,000. We closed on it December 15th. I hadn't even collected rents, right? And we ended up using a cost seg on it with accelerated depreciation, and we were able to write off $260,000 in 50. So that whole gain that I had was washed away. Now, as Brian said, at some point I have to recapture that. That's always the trick. Yep. How long you're going to hold things? I mean, most of my portfolio better be 1031 for quite a while because I've depreciated so well. But I was able to push off a taxable situation of probably $70,000 back down the road. So cost seg is pretty interesting. It's nice to understand it when you're talking to your clients too, and bonus depreciation.
I love that. Well, and John, what's interesting too is sometimes people say, well, why do people want to push off the taxes? The answer is because it allows you, John, as the investor, to be able to hold on to that capital so you can do even more cool things with it and put your money back to work, right? If I hand it to the government
back into that property,
that's it.
And do that. And there's ways with cost seg. The beauty, cost seg is a pretty big deal. That, for example, I could sell that property now and not do a 1031.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as I bought another property within that year, so the idea was close on this, sell it, and close on it January 1. I got a year, I got a certain amount of time to buy another property that would actually be more expensive, that would cover that difference.
Love it.
Same thing again that I did, right? And so I see a lot of people that aren't doing 1031s. This is how they're structuring it.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Well, and again, what we're trying to do today, guys, is to give you options, right? So that you understand that there's no one right way, but there are certainly the wrong way. And the wrong way is don't know stuff. Because if your client had an option that would have saved them $200,000 and you didn't know about it, then shame on you. I mean, honestly, and that's okay. Has it happened to me? Of course it's happened to me. That's why I'm teaching this class, because I want to know even more about the real estate industry. And so all of it is just real estate for me. I don't differentiate. Oh, those are magical investor deals that no one will ever be able to understand. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. You're holding yourself back.
Hey,
right?
Jeff,
Well, that's all commercial stuff. Yeah, please.
So we talk all the time about, building wealth. And that first thing is we need to figure out how to make money, right? Then we need to figure out how to spend less than we make. We need to figure out how to make a little bit more than what we spend. Then we got to figure out how to invest it and make money. And then we got to figure out taxes. Because you're going to find, like, you're hearing that all the time about investors, or it's always like, well, they're not paying any taxes, right? Some people are pissed off about that. Some people are other, but you realize that the wealthy are starting to understand how to use taxes, because when they use taxes, I mean, again, it's legal, right? You got to do what's legal. But if you use what's legal to your advantage, how does that end up looking? Because when you start looking and saying, I made, if you're not paying taxes on your first $150,000 a year, that's the same as somebody making 220 or 230 in a salary. That means you can actually work less and live a better life without doing it. So it's putting those three pieces together, Jeff. And I think that's what you're talking here. You're talking about creative strategies. We're talking about understanding creative strategies with tax. We're understanding with creative financing. We're understanding putting those together, like, for the reason certain investors are going to come into your deal. So I'll give you an example with a syndication. Most people are coming into syndications, especially the last few years, they were coming in for income. Most of them big number were coming in for bonus of depreciation that they could shelter their income.
Yep. They might literally, it might be a wash on their initial capital, but now they've got that moving forward, and they can pick up equity, and they can pick up cash flow. It's crazy.
So you combine those together to give somebody an option of what they want to get into.
Yeah. And eventually you can leverage against that equity, right? This is what people forget, is now what does that mean? It means I can borrow against the equity in that property at some point once it's gained equity. What can I do with that money? Is that income? No.
And that becomes weird, right? That's become like, we're looking right now and going, I'm a little lower on cash than I'd like to be right now. Just because some other investments. I'm like, well, maybe we should go borrow against some of our houses. I'm like, well, the interest rate's at 8%. Oh, that sucks, right? But it's still, I'd rather become, it's still going to offset other income that the property's making. It's not going to be taxed quite as heavy. And there's a point where you just want the capital to do other things. Even because of that rate, it still makes sense.
That's it. Yep. And given that
it's not taxed, right? That's the beauty. You're borrowing money.
I was going to say that, and plus your net out effective tax, and a lot of, like, John lives in Oregon, right? I don't know what your, non-adjusted tax rate blended would be, but I'm guessing, well over 40%, approaching 50. And what's crazy about that is that if you can eliminate tax and now you're only paying 8% on borrowed capital, but then you can replace that capital with a project that cash flows more than 8%, hello, right? Then we're good. I can keep borrowing infinitely. This is how Robert Kiyosaki, if you read his books, he'll brag about how much debt he has. Why? Because he thinks about debt as an instrument, as a lever, rather than as a critical, like, he's not borrowing $3 billion to buy a car he can't afford. He's borrowing so that he can extend his cash flow position. There's a huge difference. It's awesome. Thank you, John. Really, really good stuff, man. Okay, so let's keep going. And by the way, knowing this stuff, again, it's going to present you as an expert with your clients. It's an awesome thing. So cost aggregation, we got that. Step up in basis. This is just understanding that the basis of a property is what you've paid for it, not just in down payment, but also in the adjustments that you've made to the property. What does that mean? Well, it could be that I was going to pick something stupid. You repaved the driveway. All right, well, did that increase the value of the property? Perhaps, right? So the cost of doing that, that increased the value, and you'd need an advisor to maybe help you with this. A CPA would be able to do this really easily, is going to understand what types of things have stepped up the value. This could reduce or eliminate cap gains tax, though, on appreciated value. Why does that matter? Because let's just say that I bought a house for $1 million, now I'm selling it for $1.3 million, but I put $300,000 into the property, all on things that are like hardscaping, renovation style stuff. Well, that $300,000 extra that I put into the property can count against my basis, which means that capital gains that I'm scared of might not exist. Because if I can document I paid $1 million plus the $300,000 in renovated costs, and then I sold it for 1.3, that's a wash, right? Again, make sure you talk to your tax advisors or have your clients do so. But talking to them about the fact that there is a step up in basis is awesome. There's also different ways, by the way, to structure a step up in basis. Some states have this. Where there can be a step up in basis at the time of a property transferring hands. So sometimes when people are purchasing, you need to be really thoughtful with them, or they need to be really thoughtful about how they're acquiring the property. Are we tenants in common? All the different structures. Sorry, I'm not going to list them off right now because my brain's not there. But I will tell you, in some states, Some of those come with a bonus step up in basis, meaning that if your property was worth $1 million the day you bought it, and then you die and now it's worth $5 million because you're in San Francisco, and you don't want Junior, your kid who's going to inherit this property, to be taxed on the $4 million in upside they just inherited. Oops. In some states, depending on how that property's owned, there's a step up in basis at that point because you died. So now they inherit the property, but the new basis is set at $5 million the day they acquire it. Awesome. How much tax do they owe? 0 in that circumstance. That's awesome. Charitable remainder trust. You see these a lot, by the way. Many times when you're selling, especially bigger properties, country properties, I see a lot of farm properties set up these way. A charitable remainder trust, this is where the donor transfers property to a trust, receiving income for a set period of time, but then the remaining assets go to a charity upon the trust termination. And the termination a lot of times is death, right? It doesn't have to be, but it could be. Sometimes these are also structured as a way to give a property to a art museum or a university or whatever, right? It offers an immediate tax deduction right away when this is set up, and then defers capital gains taxes. And it also combines some philanthropy, which is great, right? And going back to John's earlier point, by the way, no matter where your politics lie, right? And I tend to be fairly centrist, but wherever you are, it doesn't matter. The people on the left tend to subsidize, people on the right tend to incentivize. Neither is better or worse. In fact, we need a blend. That's why we got a friggin' democracy, guys. So it's an awesome thing. And that's why we vacillate, right? Have we had Republican presidents? Have we had Democratic presidents? Yes. Are we going back and forth? Yes. Why? Because we tend to balance after we overbalance, right? And so guess what, though? In the incentivized category, tax incentives work this way. They tell wealthy individuals or people controlling assets, in this case, real estate, how to mobilize the resources that are tied up in those assets to best benefit the greater good. So when we create a tax incentive, it's not a bad thing. It's us saying, if you do this with your wealth, we'll give you a tax benefit because it means we, the government, don't have to support that particular concept of infrastructure. Not good or bad. Right? There's other strategies on the other side of that, okay? All of them are good when used with a good heart. All right, tax abatement agreements. Again, we talked about these earlier. These are property taxes. They're reduced or waived based on an agreement. A lot of times this happens at the level of developers, right? And remember, developers happen in strata. Somebody might own dirt, right? And then they want to develop that dirt or get it fully entitled. Maybe they're going to sell that entitled dirt then to a property developer who's going to come in and hire contractors and architects to figure out how to actually build the property. They might then hand it off to a management co who's going to then sell or rent off different properties, et cetera, right? Everybody's taking a slice of the pie along the way. Everyone's getting paid. But understanding that tax abatement agreements is just an agreement with a municipality that this property is going to provide, when fully developed, a great economic benefit to the area. And as such, the local government will say, we're not going to tax you on it, or we're going to reduce your taxing, or we're going to delay your taxing. One of those 3 options, as a way to incentivize you doing this, because we think that the greater good will be served by offering you this incentive to continue the project and make sure that it's economically valid. Remember, developing is really high risk. So when municipalities do this, usually they're trying to mitigate risk to try to get development to happen. It's a good thing. Again, it's an incentive. And this one, energy tax credit financing. In fact, I'm going to mention energy tax credits in a couple broad categories here, but explore these with your clients. Can be really, really, really valuable. I did this with some sellers to increase the kind of the face value of their property right before they went to sell, and not a joke. Through tax credits, tax deferrals, reimbursements from the state, discounts from the providers, 0% purchase plans that can be paid off at closing, all this kind of stuff. Managed to make it cost the sellers $0, or in some really rare, weird cases, actually they make money by putting, let's say, solar on their house. And then does that increase the perceived value when I can say, and oh, your electric bill is $0 per month, right? Awesome. Love that. And so we can do this at the level of a commercial property. We can do this at the level of a single family, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and then miscellaneous. No less valuable, by the way. I just didn't know what the heck to call this category, so miscellaneous is going to have to do. But no less valuable. We're going to go through some really good ones. Master lease agreement. For a while, by the way, people were doing this with Airbnbs, which I think is crazy. This is where they'd go out and get a rental property. that they themselves are the tenant on, but they'd stroke a master lease agreement with the property owner so that they could then sublet that property. We've heard the term sublet. But what they were really doing is they would picking up the rights to be able to rent that property. They'd then rent it on Airbnb. They'd make $6,000 a month on Airbnb. Their mortgage was quote unquote, or their rental agreement in this case was $2,000 a month, and they keep the $4,000. Is that a good business? Probably not anymore, but it used to be. So master lease agreements, a lot of times they're used on commercial properties. Maybe I kind of pick up a large office area, but I'm going to structure that office area, let's just say, as what? A co-working space. Well, that would have to be on a master lease agreement if I don't own the office building I'm about to do that on, right? So there's all sorts of different ways to structure this, but it allows me to control the property. Why is that important? Because if I control the property, I control the economics of the property. The movement of money is what economics means, okay? And that's a good thing because I could potentially extract a little piece for myself. Next, what's a sale leaseback? These are very common. This is where the property owner sells the asset and then leases it back from the buyer. A lot of times this will happen with, like, let's say a business, maybe a lawyer's office. He bought the building way back when. He's got, he's got $1 million in equity on that property. He really would like to just prefer to have $1 million, right? Not the property. But he still wants to keep his law office in that building. Well, then he would sell it with a sale leaseback baked into that agreement that you would help structure, right? And that sale leaseback, or an attorney would, and that sale leaseback would simply say that I'm going to be the tenant. I'm going to sell you the property, but I'm going to get a tenancy agreement for X amount of time. Maybe they're going to sign a 10-year lease or whatever. There's different ways for this to come together. John, I see your hand. What's up, buddy? Hold on. Let's unmute you. Hold on.
So go back to the last one, Jeff. Go back to the last slide because they coincide with what you just did.
Yep.
So master lease. So what we're also seeing with master lease with an option.
Mm-hmm.
So so the last one is you buy it, you let the seller stay. What I've seen often is somebody does a master lease with an option to buy 3 to 4 years from now. So what that happens is the seller may say, I don't want to manage this as a rental anymore. So I don't want to worry about it. So they feel comfortable that you're always going to pay the rent every month.
Right.
But then you can put other tenants in, then 3 or 4 years down the road, you're going to see what the market looks like. Or you may be trying to do a development on it. So you can start doing some of the, you may say, I only want to buy it if this development goes through, but you're going to risk the money. So like I'm doing a development project, it's taking me a year.
Yep.
If I could have been renting a house out there, that would have been covered some of the costs. And I'm controlling the asset, but I'm not having to take the full money out until I know whether it's going to be profitable or not.
It's huge.
So those work together hand in hand, those two, Jeff. I thought it was good to point out.
Yeah, well, and what John just described is that's like a superior risk-adjusted approach to the marketplace, right? He's effectively looking at this and he's saying, okay, I could go in, I could tie up this property with this master lease agreement and the option, right? Meaning I've pre-negotiated a price I think is acceptable. And then I can keep watching until I'm like sure that it's going to be good because I've got all my tenants in place and et cetera, et cetera. And then I could arguably close on that option, or execute the option, which simply means I'm now buying the property and I already know it's profitable from day one. In fact, what I also could see is a double close right there.
And the seller's at a point where they don't want to deal with it anymore. I don't want to manage these tenants. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So they may not be at a point where they need the money ASAP, but they don't want the headache anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Joanne, I saw your hand up.
Well, I was just, when you're talking about the Airbnb, like I'm going to rent your house for $2,000 and Airbnb it for $6,000 a month. One place that would be perfect and very valuable to the owner is, let's say it's a little old lady, 75, 85 years old. She can get $1,500 with the local rental department or rental management company with regular rent, but I'm going to pay her $2,500 and I'm going to manage everything and I'm going to do the Airbnb. She has no ability to do the Airbnb herself to benefit from the $6,000. She doesn't really want to get the $1,500. She'd rather get the $2,500. Anyway, there's a lot of ways that it's a win-win for everybody, even if somebody is making a huge profit on the effort because the other person has no ability or wherewithal to do it.
Well, people making money is how capitalism works. I always hate it when people are like, well, but I don't want to do that because they're going to make money. I'm like, somebody makes money whenever you do anything. You watch Netflix, somebody makes money and you're not stopping doing that. So maybe think about how to build some wealth in the meantime.
And I totally agree with, like, let's say that your friend wants to like, why wouldn't you want to help your friend make money? Why are you going to help Amazon or, some other big, huge Walmart? Like, why wouldn't I buy something from my friend? This is a side note, just, you brought it up. Why
Yep.
wouldn't I want my friend to make the profit? Why am I going to insist on going to Mart because my friend's just trying to make money? Let's all help each other out.
That's exactly right. I love it. Well, let's keep moving on these. And what's interesting, and I'm sure everybody's noticing this, is that these are top producers who are able to sound off on this stuff. And not surprisingly, they've done this stuff with clients, with themselves, right? To be able to get out there and participate in the markets. I remember hearing John Sellers say, if you're out there advertising that you've got the best investment ever, nobody should ever pass this up, and you're passing it up, what up? Like, figure this out. And part of it is learning. That's why you're here today, which is awesome. Like learning what the different options are, but then you got to go layer deeper. I'm not covering any of this with enough depth today for you to be able to act yet. So hopefully you're doing what I said at the beginning, taking notes, figuring out where your knowledge gaps are. That's what I do all the time. I'm working on all this stuff myself, right? So that you can master it. And as you master things, what you notice is that your wealth position will expand, compounded by your knowledge base. Okay. But you got to still act. You can't just sit on the sidelines and hope for the best. So we covered sale leaseback, really good stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go one layer kind of to the left here, which is this is where you converting your property into securities that are then sold to investors. If you are going to do anything that involves securitization of your property, you need to talk with a real estate attorney. I promise you, because the SEC does start getting involved past a point with a lot of these different types of structures, and you need to have an understanding of that. You cannot just, for instance, make a 506c syndication and then blast it out on Facebook to anybody or run a Google ad. You can't. You'll learn really quickly that you can't because you'll be deposed. So, but in this case, you would convert your debt into securities, converting your debt into securities, right? Not the equity. This is a different structure, which is really interesting. And then this would provide you with some liquidity. What if, for instance, you have a note on that property, but you're able to securitize against that note and you sell the note and they're expressing cash flow based on margins against that note. That may not sound clear right now, but there are some really, I'm sure, great. I haven't done them and I haven't done this research, but I'm sure if you type this into YouTube, you'll find a description on how this works and some visuals if you're a visual learner. Really, really common though in large scale real estate projects, especially development types of concepts. But again, the number of agents, residential agents that I've heard out there, like, this is developable land. You research this, it's not even developable. Look, that's a common problem. Don't do that. It just makes you look DUM. But also, many times, you may need to be able to speak with some level of intelligence about what that looks like, and this would be another option out there. Crowdfunding popped up and in the marketplace for a little bit there, as it pertained to how some people were funding large real estate investment opportunities. We've seen crowdfunding with all sorts of things. Go Help Me or whatever those are. Go fund yourself. But what's interesting on crowdfunding is it's actually a structure within the IRS tax code, right? Has to be, and the SEC can govern how this stuff works. So you can understand it. There's different ways to do it. Sometimes you can do this through a third party. There are websites that can help with it. But especially larger investment opportunities, maybe portfolio sales, could be large multifamilies. But it does allow this with minimal capital, many times under that accredited investor threshold that a lot of times will keep smaller investors out of bigger projects. We are going to talk really quickly just about the BRRRR method, which is actually B with 4 R's after it. We've heard Josh and his wife Rachel out in Atlanta. They came on, they talked about this. 1 week they're doing this. But this is effectively where you buy a property, right? You rehabilitate it. You usually pick it up with a short-term, high-interest loan at the beginning. Then you rent out the property. Then you refinance it on like your rate term refi with Wells Fargo or whomever. Right? You get a good normal mortgage on it. So you're cash flowing on it. Then you've got your money back. How much of my own money do I have tied up in this property? $0. Holy moly, is that possible? Can I buy a rental property with none of my, yes, right? Zero money down. Really, usually this is a long way around. Zero money down, very popular right now. Is it effective? Depends on where you're located, but is it possible? Abso-freaking-tutely, right? Got a lot of friends who are doing this. I think Josh said his just equity upside on doing that last year was about $1 million. So is it worth it? I don't know. He paid $0 and is worth $1 million more. So yes. would be the answer. You have to learn how to do it. There's great books. Bigger Pockets has kind of a leading text on this. But this is where you acquire the property. You're going to have to pick it up undervalued. Why would someone want to do this? Well, it's what John said. They're tired of being a landlord. I got to get these hedgehogs out of my property. All right. So they want to get their tenants out of there. They're just tired of having to deal with it. I don't want to fix one more dang washing machine. I don't know what it is, right? Everyone's got different reasons. Maybe they're sick, they're old. Who cares? I mean, I care for them as a person. Who cares what their reason is what I'm saying. Okay. And then you refinance to pull out the equity and fund future investments. So you can recycle your capital. There's a repeat structure on there. Debt stacking. This happens a lot. Senior debt, mezzanine debt. This could be multiple loans. You can do this on single family homes. You can do this on multifamily properties. Someone will take first position. Someone will take second position, et cetera. But this is where maybe one lender doesn't want to take all the risk, but multiple lenders can kind of hold hands, work together. And this works, especially on large capital intensive projects, right? So very large projects, you're picking up a 20-unit apartment complex, you might be more likely to do something like this. How would you figure out? Go to an institutional debt provider, start asking some questions. Start off with the statement, I'm dumb, I've never done this before, and then they'll help you, right? So long as you're with somebody with ethics. Number 47, seller incentivized renovation credit, right? This is just a different type of a credit out there that actually can, where the seller can create an incentive for the buyer for repairs and renovations that they're planning on doing upon purchase. Sometimes this could work for an older seller, somebody who does not want to do all the renovation on their property themselves before selling. But by giving them this option, maybe they could help the buyer to offset these renovation costs. It adds value to the property. The buyer then gets the benefits of that value, the value add, and the seller could incentivize this. So it just encourages a smoother transaction. Is there one way to set this up? No, there's about 6 million ways, but it's interesting. Partnership buyout. This is where maybe two partners collaboratively own a property. One partner wants to get out of it. There's got to be life after landlord. I want to get out of this thing. So then we structure an agreement. I say, listen, Tara, you and I own this property together, but over time, my cash flow position's actually, or your cash flow position is going to buy me out of my equity position. So I'm going to have enhanced cash flow for a while. You're going to have reduced cash flow. And at the end of that, you're going to own all of the property, and then you're going to have all of the cash flow. All right. And all of the equity, income, depreciation, leverage, all that stuff. Creative down payment sources, right? Can you do this all the time if you're working with Bank of America? No, not necessarily. But depending on your creativity level as you're putting the deal together, can you even barter goods and services to fulfill down payment requirements? Well, especially if you're doing seller financing, absolutely, right? I see this a lot of times on rural properties, wine properties, this could happen, marijuana properties, this could happen, farm properties, this could happen. Very common. The implements that are being kind of included. Maybe I say, I don't need those implements. You can go ahead and sell them off, but let's count that sale toward my down payment. Or perhaps I have something I could barter. Maybe I have a service that I offer, and I could offer that service for a period of time, and we could to figure out what the defined value of that is and count it toward my down payment to the seller. So it's in lieu of cash is really what we're looking at there. Is that legal? It's awesome. Just about anything is legal if you structure it correctly. And a collateral swap. This is where we swap one property as collateral for a new loan on a different property. That means, like, I literally have equity over here. My loan is collateralizing against this property, and now I'm just going to swap in a different property for the collateralization, so I could free up this property, sell it, do something different with my money. Is that creative? Sure. Do I need that level of creativity if I'm John and Jill Sellers and I own, 2,000 properties or whatever? These guys are crazy, right? So yeah, I might, right? I might need to move some chess pieces around to make sure that I'm thinking forward so I can make best use of my resources. Is that important? Yeah. Should you know it now? Of course. Okay. So why do we mention all of these things today? Here's all 50 again. If you want to take a picture, right? Is this everything, by the way? No. Could we have made this 1,500 creative things you could do? Yeah, probably. I don't know. These are 50 that seemed fairly straightforward and kind of upfront. These are things you're going to run into, even if you are just kind of doing your day-to-day. I'm just a normal agent, right? Don't be normal. be abnormal by being superhuman. Learn great things that you can bring to your clients. So thank you guys for that. And what I'll mention is while we've got the remaining 9-10 minutes, we have other experts on the call, by the way. So I would love it if anybody has any questions. And I haven't been watching. I've not been watching at all the questions in the chat. But anything that we could cover in these remaining couple of minutes are great. I'm happy to do that. Or we can also talk strategically about how these things can help you to build your business, to take more listings, to get more signed buyer broker agreements. That's a new thing. Whoop, whoop, right? Is that good? Well, it's good if you figure out how to use it as a tool, right? A hammer is a great tool unless you start hitting yourself in the head with it. In which case, not very helpful anymore. Now it might hurt you, right? So buyer broker agreement could be a great tool. All of this stuff today, great tool. Any questions? Like I said, I haven't been watching the chat. Feel free to just unmute. Or also comments. Like I said, we've got a lot of really people who are smarter than me and definitely more experienced. Here's Ray Coburn. Ray, what's up, my man?
Hey, thanks. So just with what we're covering today, I've had a couple of wholesalers contact me, and they were like, well, they were kind of like friends of mine before, back in my days. They were like, I can't, I feel like I can't do wholesaling anymore in Oregon, and there's several other states where those states are pushing down on wholesaling. A lot of these things that we're covering today has a lot to do with wholesaling, and I think with us as licensed agents, can help us fill those gaps where we might be able to not only just start helping people where traditionally listing or selling their homes, and also helping buyers get those traditional fundings where we can do those creative financing terms to fill those gaps where wholesalers now are feeling like they're falling out, where we will be able to fill those positions as licensed agents. So I think that that's going to be adding to our value as agents.
Yep, huge. Only if we know how to do it, though, right? Only if we know how to have those conversations. And how would we learn that? We just explore it, right? You have to start the conversation in your own mind. What's interesting is a lot of wholesalers have also realized in recent years, right? Like, I could make a lot of money and I'm just expressing margin. For anyone who doesn't know, a wholesaler gets a property under contract for X, they sell for Y, Y is bigger than X, and they take the difference.
And wholesalers have taken up about 50%, from what I've seen, about 50% of the real estate market in advertising, sales, transactions, and stuff like that would otherwise come to us as licensed agents.
It's a skimming strategy. And is it bad? No, it's legal. I mean, it's fine, However, here's where wholesalers miss out. They look to extract this margin. They have to do huge volume of these in order to make a ton of money. And they're missing out on some lifetime advantages of holding property, of actually owning, like participating in the market instead of just skimming the market for a quick upside, right? But all of that is subject now to cap gains. Like, where am I going to, unless they have a what would you call it? Like a passive losses to offset active income strategy, they're just going to pay huge taxes. A lot of it's going to get slurped back into the economy. And thanks for supporting America, right? Like that's the thing. So it's our job to help people, even our wholesaler friends, to say, hey, it's really cool what you're doing. And I love that. First off, maybe you want to become an agent. Second off, maybe if you're not wanting to do that, we could start to look at some different strategic approaches to you continuing to participate in the marketplace using the skill set that you've developed, but to hold on to these properties and then to spend capital or equity into new projects moving forward. Is that valid, Ray?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of wholesalers are wanting to work with agents right now under what's called novations. And so just being careful on those, because some of those things that, as a wholesaler, there's very little rules or anything that I would ever have to follow. But now as a licensed agent, I'm having to look really deep into what I can and what I can't do. And there's how the wholesaler structures the novation. It can be, in my opinion, in some cases, and it's just a little bit more me looking into it to find out the legalities of it. But again, going back to being a wholesaler, there's very few laws or rules that I really had to follow, because it was just kind of like, well, if I couldn't do it in this state, I'll just do it in the next state, and I'll just keep moving on.
Right.
As a licensed agent, I have to make sure now I'm following the rules and making sure that, can I market this property from a person that doesn't own it and is not a licensed agent? And how do I kick them back? Because now they're not a licensed agent, they're just a regular person. So now they can't get my commissions. But it's just a lot of those legalities that definitely I just got to look more into. But wholesalers are going to start transitioning to utilizing real estate agents to list
Yep.
properties to maintain the middleman so they can still get paid. But again, they don't own the property to market or list. So
Right. And ultimately this is really important. Your fee, whatever your fee is, right? We're not fee fixing today on this call. I promise. All right. So your fee, whatever it is, can still be preserved in the process, particularly intellectually on the behalf of the seller and the buyer, if you're actually providing value. This is what's weird for agents. Well, I want to make sure my commission is preserved. Well, yeah, well, then do something. They're going to want to pay you if you're providing real value. If you're not helping them to make more money or to extract more value from their property, then what's the point of you? Right? Don't be the skimmer. Help people to understand how to actually just mature the real estate industry, and you'll get paid in proportion to the value that you're adding, which, by the way, could be immense. Right.
And one of the quick things that I just kind of leave everybody with is a real quick owner carry financing term that really is more beneficial to the buyer and the seller, that just cuts right to the chase. Is just having a down payment where your buyer can meet with the seller that says, hey, you know what, I'll give you 5%. You can have some pocket change, but I'll also make sure that I pay off the seller and the buyer's agent commissions, all in the down payment, so you don't have to, and then I'll also include closing costs. So that might be, maybe not 5% or 3.5% like an FHA, but maybe 20% down that they're going to have to put down. And then the seller's like, okay, I don't have to pay the agents and I don't have to pay the closing costs, and I still get some money in my pocket, and you're going to be locked into maybe an interest only payment for 7 to 10 years.
Yep.
And I still get my money. So I'm making more money on the back end, and I don't have no money out of pocket to sell you this property. Let's do it. Like that is an ideal position to put, where they may not be traditionally accepted to be qualified for a loan.
Totally. Well, and then investors obviously are going to be lining up around the block, because what they start to see, and I'll use Ray as an example, what they start to see is it feels like every few days Ray's coming out with the next investment deal, and they're like pre-structured. Well, he's gotten the seller to understand what their options are and why this one specific option that will be really shiny and attractive to investors might also be great for them. So he's putting a deal together in terms of what's called the capital stack. The capital is everything that's needed to capitalize a property. So the whole purchase price. Right? But that might be a blend of different types of debt, right? Loans, or different types of equity, which could be participation, partnerships, could be syndication, could be all sorts of things, right? It could be participation between the buyer and the seller. When we start to massage that thing to understand, well, you'd be okay with this, wouldn't you? Because it would do this for you. Oh, well, sure. I guess that sounds pretty good. When you start to learn how to talk about them and present what the upside is for those people, then they'll agree to those. If you can get them to pre-agree, so seller is offering following terms is a very interesting thing to read when I'm looking at a property, right? I get all like, because I want to see that stuff. It doesn't work on every property. It's always on the right stuff. But you can open up probably half the real estate market that you're not even opening up right now, that is occupied currently by people who think, act, and behave this way. What's in it for the seller? What's in it for the buyer? And if you don't know how to structure this stuff, by the way, don't try to put all of this in your addenda by yourself. Go to your supervising broker, whatever brokerage you're with. If it's EXP, they're great, right? And can they help you understand how to structure this so that you make sure it's all legal, binding, etc.? Yes, absolutely. Or start off with a really experienced agent, maybe partner with them on the deal, right? Split your commission. And then guess what? Then go over and now talk to the supervising broker to make sure you have full sign off on the way that you're going to verbalize it, but this other person's helping you to put it together and they've done it 10 times, right? I would do that. Absolutely. Because guess what? 100% of a deal that falls apart because you don't know what to do with it is $0 in income for you, right? 50% of a deal that comes to the finish line that you never would have gotten there is worth money. Who cares? Why are you so worried about what your percentage split is? Split it with somebody who'll help you get it there, and you're going to learn something. That's the cost of education, but it's also the cost of completion, right? Like you're going to get it done, and that's a really big deal. Anything else you wanted to add there, Ray?
Basically what I was also working on too right now, I have 2 contracts right now working on triple net lease options, in an owner carry position too. So, with that being said, the buyers are thinking about putting down, doing a triple net where they basically cover all the expenses of property management of the property, paying property taxes, maintaining the property, all the expenses it costs to owning and operating a property as they were the sole owner of it. On top of that, a certain percentage of their income that they make off of that business goes to the seller with a 7-10 year balloon at the end.
Perfect.
So,
yep.
Those are really
like a profit participation or profit sharing agreement, a PSA. And what's interesting on this stuff is people think, well, I could never put that together. Why not? This stuff's not complicated. Usually, listen, this is how complicated a lot of these look once you see what these documents look like. Buyer agrees to share blah percent of profits on such and such LLC with such and such seller until such and such date. Sign here, sign here. Like, you guys, like, this is not like a 900-page document. It's not a second mortgage on the property. This is some of it, not all of it, some of it is more simple than you want to believe. And then, but what you're doing is you're extending options and creating ways forward that wouldn't have existed. Right.
Thank you. That's about it. I'll just let somebody.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, you know what? What I'll say is, first off, thank you to everyone who is here today. And my goal today was not to answer all of the questions of the universe or to give all of the knowledge of the universe. All of this is public information. You can go get it yourself, right? But hopefully the goal today is to spark your curiosity and to remind you that he who controls the vocabulary in an industry and then acts on that vocabulary ultimately controls the entire industry. If you want to be perceived as, or actually just be a leader in real estate, stop separating out investment real estate from commercial real estate, from residential real estate. It's all just what? Real estate. If you zoom out, do you want to be a real estate professional or not? Then you need to be involved in the marketplace, and you need to be involved in two ways. Way number one, transact a lot of real estate, help a lot of people buy, sell, hold property, invest, etc. Way number two, you yourself need to buy, sell, and hold property. And we're trying to conquer both of those things simultaneously. Why do you want to make more money? So you can buy more real estate so that your real estate pays your bills eventually instead of all of your work, right? All right, this is really good stuff. Thank you guys again for being here today. Thanks for everyone for being part of the community. And I got to tell you, this call is one of my favorite times in the week. Today is December 18th, so we're coming up on the holiday season. So happy holidays to everybody. Happy New Year, that's coming up. And I'll see you out with some fun music. All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.